take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. Hallelujah. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord.
Amen.
Hallelujah. Father God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for getting up for us. Humble ourselves in your sight at this time that you have identified and designated as the time for your word to go forth. Let us clear the atmosphere with all distractions. Let us focus on your spoken word, Father God. We ask that you just continue, Father God, to open up our ears and our hearts, circumcise our hearts, that we may receive the word on fertile ground. And right now I ask, Father, your humble servant, to just speak through me, remove me. Father God, give me the strength, give me the power, give me the courage to speak the things that you have told me to speak to these your lovely people, these people you love so dearly, Father. And we pray that everything is said and done for your glory and your glory alone. I pray for these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. My brothers and sisters, on the last couple of weeks, last couple of Sundays, we've been dealing with these verses. And we learned that during this time, Jesus had revealed his death to his disciples. He had told his disciples that it was time for him to go to Jerusalem to be tried, crucified, buried, and resurrected. And we learned that Peter, being Peter, rebuked Jesus. Told Jesus, no, you stop talking like that. You're not going to be crucified. You're going to be with us always. And Jesus told him, you get behind me, Satan. You are mindful of things of man and not God. So after that, God told, or Jesus told his disciples in these verses, then Jesus says to disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. So Jesus was telling them, look, don't get so caught up and concerned about what's getting ready to happen to me. Because you too have a road to Calvary that you must go to. And we learned over these last couple of Sundays that we too have our own Dolorosa road that we must walk to Calvary cross. And we learned that these three actions, denying ourselves and taking up our cross and follow Jesus, are three things we're going to need as we walk our own road to Calvary. But we also learned that these words were not just for those disciples. Come on now. Come on. But for anyone who confess or profess or desire to be a disciple of Christ, these three things: deny thyself, take up thy cross, and follow Jesus, are three things that any disciple is going to use over and over and over. It's not a one-time event, but it's going to be a continuous process as we go through this thing called life. And as we celebrate this weekend of Jesus' death and his burial and his resurrection and his ascension, we learn that it's okay to reflect about what Jesus did for us, the life that he gave for us. But we also realize that too many Christians have become only empathizers of Christ's journey, as opposed to participants of Christ's sufferings as he traveled his road to Calvary. Because the Apostle Paul says in Philippians 3:10, he said, I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. I know that scripture scares a lot of people away. When you start talking about knowing Jesus and the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, a lot of us start backing up.
Come on now.
But look, I want the good stuff. I'm okay with the power of your resurrection, but the power of your suffering and becoming like him in his death. But every disciple has to know Jesus, not just for what he did, but we have to, at some point in our lives, become part of the participation in his sufferings, if we're real disciples. These sufferings was not just for Jesus and the Apostle Paul, but for everyone who professed to be a disciple of Christ. And as we travel our journey, we will need these three actions. Denying ourselves, taking up our cross, and following Jesus. And Mr. Brewer, there's really no getting around this. You know, sometimes we try to rationalize why I don't have to do or go through a certain thing. But as I've been dealing with this, and Holy Spirit been dealing with me over these last 3 weeks, I realize there's really no getting around these three. You're going to have to deny yourself, take up your own cross, and follow Jesus. Let me hear it. I'm just giving you a background. These last 2 weeks, the first Sunday, we talked about denying ourselves. And Charles John Eliot says, self-denial is not our common thoughts of self-denial. The denial to ourselves of some pleasure or profit fall far short of the meaning of this word in the Greek. You see, the man is to deny his whole self, all his natural motives and impulses, so far as they come into conflict with the claims of Christ. In other words, any desire that we may have that does not line up with Christ, then we should deny it. I don't care how pleasurable it may seem. We have a responsibility, if we are disciples, to deny those things that are pleasurable if they are in conflict with what Christ teaches. And this idea of the world saying, well, it must be right because it's natural for me to do, is not scripture. Because many, I'm talking about believers, many believers say, well, it's okay because it's the natural thing for me to do. But if it's in conflict with what the word says, we should not do it. We should deny ourselves. And then last Sunday we talked about taking up our cross. And the cross that Jesus says that every disciple should take up is a total commitment and full surrender to Christ. It may involve cruel slander, loss of representation, desertion of friends and family, incarceration, betrayal, and even perhaps physical death for Christ's sake. And we learn the cross that we must bear is not necessarily our problems and our issues. Many times we get our cross confused with our own issues and our problems. That's not the cross that Jesus says that we need to take up. Now, many times Jesus will use our issues and our problems so that we can take up our cross. But they are not necessarily our cross. And we also learn that no one can carry your cross but you. It's got your specific dimensions fitted for your back. Only you can carry your cross. We also learn we can't give it back. No matter how much we want to give it back, we have to carry our cross to completion. So denying, taking up our cross, and following Jesus is a process that the disciples would have to endure as they walk this Christian journey. And what we learned also that Jesus exercised these same three actions as he went through his earthly ministry. He denied himself. He denied us. The Bible says in Philippians 2:7, he made himself of no reputation. In other words, he emptied himself of his glory temporarily. He set aside his earth, his heavenly privileges. He denied himself so he can come down and take up his cross and follow the will of his Father. Jesus is not asking us to do anything that he has not already done. Hallelujah. So here we are today with following Jesus. So what does it really mean to follow Jesus? Many of us, when asked, are we followers of Jesus, we raise our hands, and we'll raise both hands. I'm a follower of Jesus. But what does it really mean to follow Jesus? Now, it does not mean literally following every place that Jesus went. It cannot mean that because there's no way that we can physically go every place that Jesus went. So we know that it does not mean that when Jesus says, follow me in Matthew 16 and 24. And we shouldn't be following Jesus simply out of curiosity or what he can do for us. In Matthew 4 and 25, it says, the great multitudes followed him from Galilee and from Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. But they were following Jesus out of curiosity and for healings and things such as that. Anytime that he would do something miraculous, he would draw a crowd and people would follow him. But that's not what Jesus is necessarily referring to in Matthew 16 and 24 when he says, follow me. When Jesus tells his disciples in us to follow him, he's not necessarily saying follow me to a particular place, but follow my example. Follow my example in how I dealt with the challenges of life when they came up on me. This is what Jesus is saying. When we travel our own personal road to Calvary, follow my example of how I dealt with the lies and the slanders and the beatings and the abandonment. When he said, follow me, follow the way I acted, the way I lived, the way I reacted, the way I loved. In spite of all the things that are going on in this life, follow me. Take up your cross and follow me. But do we still really want to follow Jesus? Let me hurry. Let me get you out of here. Y'all ain't leaving me a lot of time today. So if we profess to be disciples of Christ, there are three things, and I'm going to get you out of here, that we should know about following Christ. The first thing, if we profess to be followers of Christ, there should be a proclamation. There should be a proclamation of the person that you are following. In other words, there should be a public announcement. And there's three ways that we can proclaim to be followers of Christ. The first way is verbal. There can be a verbal proclamation. In other words, our confession. There should be a confession. When we say that we are followers of Christ, there should be clear evidence of our spoken confession that we are followers of Christ. You see, when Jesus walked the earth, there was no doubt. He verbally confessed that he was there to follow the will of the Father. In John 6 and 38, he says, for I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. Jesus proclaimed verbally that he was following the will of his Father. People should know that we are followers of Christ by what we say. If you desire to follow someone, that means that you are not ashamed of the one that you are following. If you are a member of NBC, you should not be ashamed to say, I'm your pastor. If you are ashamed to say that you are following me, then there's something wrong somewhere. There's either something wrong with you or something wrong with me. Amen. Because if you say that you are a member of NBC and I am the under shepherd that God has placed here, then you should be one say, who your pastor? You should be Pastor Dawson. Who did you say? Pastor Dawson. Yeah. But there should be a verbal proclamation when we say that we are following Christ. And then we can also proclaim through our baptism. When Jesus began his earthly ministry, he was baptized by John the Baptist. And through his baptism, Jesus was proclaiming, he was following the will of his Father. In Matthew 3 and 16 and 17, it says, when he had been baptized, Jesus came up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him. And he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting up on him. And suddenly a voice came from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Jesus' baptism was a proclamation that he was there to follow his Father's will and not his own. And the reason why we get baptized today is that we tell a world that we are following Christ. Now understand, there's no power in the water. The power is in the confession. We get baptized because we say, look, I'm following the example that Jesus followed, and I'm here to follow Christ. And because he got baptized, I'm getting baptized. But don't misunderstand, there's no power in the water. Because if you have not confessed Christ, I don't care how many times you get dunked, the power is in the confession. So we confess and we proclaim that we are a follower of Christ through baptism. And then finally, the way that we proclaim that we are a follower of Christ is through our lifestyle. We proclaim to the world that we are followers of Christ through our lifestyle. Now, if we are not utilizing this proclamation, the first two are useless. That's it. Yeah. And we can do more harm to the kingdom than good if we are professing and confessing to be a follower of Christ, and we've been baptized but not living the lifestyle that says we are followers of Christ. And it really, no matter, you can get baptized every month, and you can wear all types of Jesus hats, Jesus t-shirts, you can have Jesus on your license plate, you can have Jesus Nikes, it don't matter what you got. If you are not living a lifestyle that's proclaiming that I am a follower of Christ, then the rest is really useless. It's hypocrisy is what it is. And this is the problem why so many in the world don't want to come to Christ, because we wear all types of paraphernalia that says I'm a follower of Jesus, and we cussing everybody out, and we raising all types of hell, we lying, we cheating, we stealing, but yet I'm proclaiming and confessing that I'm a follower of Christ, and we're doing more harm than good. If our lifestyle is not proclaiming, I know y'all ain't coming here. No, you want a nice Easter sermon, so you can go out high and go home, eat your hands. Too many have proclaimed to be a follower. There's no evidence. If we are a follower, if we proclaiming to follow Christ, there should be evidence. There should be evidence in our love, in our sacrifice, in our self-control. There should be evidence that we are a follower of Christ. We shouldn't have the same desires that the world necessarily has if we say that we are a follower of Christ. Understand, we are not better than have something in us. We have the Holy Spirit. We have a relationship. The idea is that our relationship would draw those because we got compassion and we got love and we got patience. We got forgiveness. All of the things that Jesus modeled is now in our lifestyle. Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. So the first thing we should have, or we should know to be a follower of Christ, is the proclamation. The second thing that we should know is we should be persistent when we follow Christ. Jesus was persistent in carrying his cross. No matter what happened during Jesus' earthly ministry, he was persistent in following the will of his Father. No matter who rejected him, his family rejected him.
Yes, they did.
But Jesus still did the will of his Father. In John 7:5 it says, for even his did not believe in him. But Jesus still went forth and followed the will of his Father. Can I tell you, when we take up our cross to follow Jesus, we must be persistent. There's times when we just have to press our way through some situations and some circumstances. But Jesus said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Now understand, he didn't simply say, deny yourself and take up your cross. And I was thinking about that. Because if he simply said, deny yourself and take up your cross and not follow me, then there would be something missing in that equation. Because if I'm simply denying myself and taking up the burdens of my cross and not following, and I thought about this, then the burdens of my cross can really crush me. If I'm not moving forward, if I'm not being persistent, if I simply have denied myself and taken up my cross, now I'm actually trying to fight the burdens of my cross. And then they get so heavy, my burdens can crush me. But Jesus never designed for the burdens of our cross to crush us. They were designed to propel us closer and closer to him. So that's why we have to be persistent. Too many of us are being crushed by our cross and not being propelled because we are not being persistent. Because with so many things come in our lives, I stop. And I'm not telling you it's easy. No. But we can't stop.
No.
Paul says in Philippians 3:14, I press toward the goal of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. He never said it was going to be easy, but Paul said, I press. The press indicates that there's something on the other side. There's some force on the other side. Because anytime you have to press, that means there's some resistance somewhere on the other side. But Paul said, I press. We have to press sometimes on this journey. We got to be persistent. We can't stop. If I stop, my burdens crush me. This is why I have to always be going forward. I don't care how difficult it gets. I'm always going forward, even if it's just a prayer. If it's just a meditation, if it's just reading my word, if it's just a praise, if it's just worship, I don't care how heavy. Don't stop. Keep pressing forward. We have to be persistent in this thing and following Christ. Good God Almighty. I know these crosses get heavy. I know they get heavy. But I'm telling you, there's blessings in your cross. There's blessings in your cross. So first, we must proclaim to be we need to be persistent as we follow Christ. And finally, we must understand our purpose in following Christ. Stay with me right here. Because if we don't grasp this concept, then we won't be able to follow Christ as we should. Because it doesn't matter how much we proclaim to be followers of Christ. And we really can't be persistent if we don't know our purpose in following Christ. See, no matter, I don't care who you follow, you should know the purpose of why you follow. You just shouldn't be following people all arbitrarily. Young people, don't be imitating following just anybody just because they're on TV or they dunk the basketball. Or can rap or sing a song or whatever the case may be. Know why you are following whoever you may be following. There should be a purpose. You should know the purpose why you are following whoever you may be following. Because if we don't know the purpose, then we really just existing. We really just going in circles. We need to know our purpose, and this is why I believe so many Christians are not living a life, the life that Christ wants us to live, because we don't really know the purpose in following Christ. Either we don't know the purpose or we're not committed to the purpose. And we have the same purpose. Every Christian, every believer has the same purpose in following Christ. It's the same purpose that Christ had when he was on earth, and that is to glorify the Father. That's every Christian purpose. Ultimate purpose is to glorify the Father. Stay with me.
Come on.
Because Jesus says this. In John 17:1, Jesus spoke these words, lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, that your Son also may glorify you. Now stay with me. Understand, Jesus dying for the sins of the world was not his ultimate purpose. That was his assignment that led to the fulfillment of the purpose of glorifying the Father. Stay with me now, because I see some of y'all backing up on that. Dying for the sin was not Jesus' ultimate purpose for coming. That was his assignment to fulfill his ultimate purpose of glorifying his Father, because when he died, the Father was glorified. What drove Jesus to persevere through his painful assignment of being crucified was because he was committed to his purpose of glorifying the Father. If we are to be disciples for Christ and to follow him, we first need to understand and then be committed to our purpose of glorifying God. Oh, don't you get it? See, my purpose in life drives my persistence. I know my purpose, so I can be persistent. Oh, don't you get it? You see, when I graduated high school, I set a goal. I had a goal to get a college degree. At that time, that was my purpose in life, to obtain a college degree. Now, to obtain a college degree, I had to go to class and complete assignments. The assignment was not my purpose for being in college. But I had to complete the assignment to fulfill my purpose of getting a college degree. Understand, I didn't always like the assignments. Assignments they gave me was difficult. And to be honest, I really didn't have a lot of interest in it. But I knew if I wanted to achieve my purpose, I had to complete my assignment. But I kept my eyes on the purpose. The purpose drove my motivation and my persistence to complete every assignment they gave me. Oh, good God. Oh, don't you get it? The assignments that Christ gives us are temporary. What glorifies Him is eternal. Too many of us are caught up in our assignments. Yes, we are. Our assignments of ushering and teaching and singing and preaching and evangelizing. Look, these are important to the kingdom. But this is not your purpose. Too many are caught up in our assignment. And then, when somebody takes your assignment away from you, we want to quit church. We want to quit God because we're caught up in our assignment and not our purpose. We need to get wrapped up in our purpose. This is why so many of us, as soon as we say something or get criticized, or you didn't really sing that, or you should do this while you preaching, we get mad, we get upset, because we caught up in the and not our purpose. We too caught up in the assignment and not the purpose. Come on. My purpose drives my desires. My assignment is not always comfortable. It's not always pleasant. And if I'm caught up in my assignment, when it gets too challenging or it gets threatened, or pastor says you need to sit down. And pastor says, maybe you shouldn't sing that song that long. Or maybe you shouldn't preach that long. Or maybe you should do this or do that. Oh, I'm done. Because I'm caught up in my assignment and not my purpose. See, if I'm caught up in my purpose of glorifying God, then even though my assignment may be difficult, I won't quit because my purpose has not changed. Yes, we should have a desire. Don't get me wrong. We should have a desire to fulfill the assignments, but your assignments do not define you. Your assignment, not your purpose. Your purpose is eternal. It never changes. It's glorifying God. It's glorifying God. I'm getting my desire to love NBC unconditionally. It's wrapped up in my purpose and not my assignment of being pastor. Because if tomorrow you said you went and packed up my office, took my keys away, and put everything on the curb, and said, thank you, Pastor, for these 5 years, well, it's time for us to move on. Don't you know my purpose of loving you unconditionally still has not changed? My assignment would have changed, but my purpose of loving you unconditionally still remains the same. Now, if I get upset and start cussing you out because you said, Pastor, we don't want you anymore, then something is wrong because I am not fulfilling my purpose. Because I don't care what you say to me. I don't care what you do to me. I should love you unconditionally because the Bible says that's how you glorify God. There's no way I can glorify God by hating on you. No way. We cannot be too caught up in the assignment glorifying God, then watch this, he will give me everything I need to fulfill this purpose. Jesus' assignment got difficult. It got so difficult that Jesus asked the Father to let his cup, or his assignment of dying for the world, to pass by him. But what kept Jesus going was not the assignment, but his purpose of glorifying God. That's why Jesus was able to tell his Father, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. And because Jesus had a desire to fulfill the purpose God gave him, and God gave him everything he needed to fulfill his assignment of being the sin offering for the world. Our blessings is all wrapped up in our purpose. If by chance you feel you're not getting blessed like you should, maybe I'm wrapped up in my assignment and not my purpose. Because if my purpose never changes, and it shouldn't, of glorifying God, God's going to give me everything I need. See, because when your assignment gets difficult, and you want to stop carrying your cross, you need to start focusing on glorifying God. And what ultimately comes from this overwhelming blessings of glorifying God. You see, God will give you what you need to fulfill your assignments, so you can accomplish every purpose of glorifying him. See, the reason why I'm persistent in my assignments, despite the obstacles and challenges, is I understand my purpose of glorifying God. You see, my overflow is wrapped up in my purpose. It's wrapped up. You see, my abundance is wrapped up in my purpose and my desire to fulfill my purpose. You see, my peace that surpasses all understanding when all hell is breaking loose is wrapped up in my purpose of glorifying God and not my assignment. My abundance of love, even though people may have abandoned me, is wrapped up in my purpose of glorifying God and not my assignment. Watch this. Even my power over my enemies is wrapped up in my purpose of glorifying God. My overflow is strictly wrapped up in my purpose of glorifying God. And I know God will give me everything I need to fulfill that purpose. See, you can't put your assignments above your purpose. And I'm afraid this is what's happening to the church today. Not just NBC, but the church today. And that's why you see so many people walking away and quitting. Because what happens is, when they cut my assignment, if I got my assignment here, my purpose here, when they cut my assignment, I'm walking out. I'm walking away from Christ. But if my purpose is here, my assignment is here, when they take away my assignment, I still got my assignment. I still got to glorify God. I still got to love Reese. I don't even know she won't let me sing. I still got to love Reese. I'm just kidding. Let me get you out of here with that. The more difficult, watch this, the more difficult the assignment, the more grace he must give us to fulfill the purpose of glorifying him. He got you. That's why your blessings is wrapped up in your purpose. The heavier your cross is, that means that's more glory that he must give you. More grace he must give you. Where sin abound, grace abound even more. Yes. The more difficult your assignment, the more grace and blessing he has to give you, as long as you keep trying to glorify him. The more you get wrapped up in your purpose, watch this, an interesting thing begins to happen. There's a change that comes over you. The more you start focusing on your purpose and not your assignment, the more you start following Christ, a change starts coming over you. Oh yeah, it does. It does. You might not even notice it, but a change starts coming over you. There's a metamorphosis taking place in you. There's a change. There's a powerful change taking place No matter how they treat you. You watch after a while. You watch after a while how your appearance and your speech start to change. And you got peace that surpasses all understanding. And you say, well, a year ago I would have cussed her out. Now I'm focusing on God's glory. I'm focusing on bringing him or her to Christ. And now even though they treat me bad, even though it's unfair how they treat me, even though I've been passed for promotion 3 times and I deserve to be promoted, I'm still going to treat you in a respectable manner because I'm focusing on glorifying God. And you watch after a while, you just going to have so much peace in your spirit. I don't care how many challenges come in your way. You keep pressing and glorifying God. Oh, it has to happen. Oh, don't you get it? It's been tested. Jesus has already tested it. You're not going through anything new. It's been proven. It's been proven. It works. And after a while, you watch your glory and your blessings start to just keep seeping out. The ultimate purpose. Because the ultimate purpose that God has for your life as you travel your road to glory is glorification. In Romans 8:19, Paul said, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Don't you know, as painful as it was for Christ to go to Calvary, as painful as it was for him to walk his road to Calvary, the glory that he's got back didn't compare to all the suffering. Oh, I'm so thankful when he went to Calvary. Oh, I'm so thankful that he wasn't worried about his assignment, but he was concerned about glorifying God. Oh, don't you get it? Because if he was more concerned about his assignment than glorifying God, he would have came down. If he was concerned about the assignment, he would have said, God, sit down the legion of angels and you take care of this. But he was more concerned about glorifying God. Oh, don't you get it? In the beginning, he denied himself. And he set aside his glory. But in the end, he got everything back. You may deny yourself for a season. And you may take up your cross for a season. But in the end, your glory, the glory that you're going to get, it's going to get God alive. The problems that you're going through, the issues that you're going through, it's going to pale. When you get your white robe, when you get your crown, when you walk the streets of heaven, it's not going to even compare. You ain't going to even remember all the issues you had, all the sacrifices you had. I'm so glad. I'm so glad he was focused on the glorifying God and not his son. Oh, I'm so glad that it didn't come down. No matter how painful it had to be. When they lied on him, when they spit on him, and put a thorn on his head. When the blood came down. When he carried that heavy cross up the Dolorosa Road, he was still focusing on glorifying God and not his society. When they hung him there between two things. Oh, I'm so glad. He was worried about glorifying God and not his society. Oh, I'm so glad. He didn't come down. Don't you get it? Don't you get it? All you got to do is press. Keep pressing. I know it gets tough. I know it's not fair apostolic anointing. Your glory. Deny thyself. Take up thy cross. You will not regret it. This was never designed to be the best part of our existence. Don't you know that? God never designed this part of our life to be the best part of our existence. The Bible says our life is like a paper.
Yes.
It's like this. Prepare to eternity. It's like this. Hold on, children. Keep pressing. Keep pressing. Keep pressing. Keep pressing. Your joy is wrapped up in your purpose. You can follow because your joy is wrapped in your purpose. Following Christ. Hallelujah. 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 Bless God. Can somebody bless God?